The World Bank has raised a fresh concern over the rising poverty in Nigeria, saying that a staggering 75.5% of rural dwellers live below the poverty line. The World Bank stated this in its latest April 2025 Poverty and Equity Brief for Nigeria. And our subject matter now is the rising rates of poverty among rural dwellers in Nigeria. Professor GONA AYUBA, an agricultural economist, is standing by on Zoom to have this conversation with us. Good evening, Prof.
Good evening. Good evening, ma'am.
Going on right away, Prof.
Yes.
Is it a scary situation, really, that most rural dwellers, and we have quite a number of Nigerians dwelling in rural communities, are faced with a serious crisis of poverty?
Yes, it's true. The issue of poverty is a very critical matter, particularly in our generation. Just like the report coming from the World Bank, that about 75.5% of people living in rural areas are living below poverty line, which is true. And this can be reflected based on the scenarios around Nigeria. For example, unemployment rates at our rural areas is part of the challenges at hand. If you look at the issue of insecurity, which has led to displacement of real farmers from their own farming communities to areas where some of them are, as of today, living in IDP camps. So you can imagine an individual that is used to producing his own food to an extent that he can even have more than enough and then go to the market and dispose part of it. Now in a situation where he is living within the IDP. While in the IDP, even what he is struggling just for immediate food that he can consume, not about farming again. So that is a serious challenge. Another issue
goes to one of the causes of the poverty experience among rural dwellers in Nigeria. But I don't know if there are others. I mean, talking about the root causes of this poverty, and if the factors are actually different from factors behind the poverty experienced in urban areas.
Yes, if you look at agriculture or generally, is an activity that is carried out that it has a relationship with the environment. And if you look at climate change, it's also one of the causes of serious poverty within the rural areas, because climate change is affecting productivity, climate change is affecting yield, climate change is also affecting the livelihood of farmers. So what a farmer generates from a hectare over the last few years, because of the effect of climate change as of today, it becomes very limited what a farmer can produce in as of today. And that is also leading to poverty in our country, Nigeria. One other issue is government's inconsistency in policies. You discover that a certain policy, when designed, before it could be implemented, or when implemented over a period of time, another government comes in and scrapes off that policy and decides to come up with a new one. So such inconsistencies are also affecting the rural farming activities. But part of also the challenges is the issue of inflation. Too much money purchasing or purchasing few quantity of goods, and that also is affecting poverty or leading to poverty in the rural areas. One other major issue is the issue of non-diversification of our economy. Agrarian society, which is the rural areas, statistics have shown that we have more farmers or more agriculturalists in rural areas than in cities. But what is happening to the rural areas is that there has not been consistent or concerted efforts in terms of investments at rural areas. So much of the investments are more in cities. And then because there is no serious investments in the rural areas, you end up having people migrating, able-bodied men migrating from rural areas to urban areas. Then most of the infrastructure, such as schools at rural areas, they are not standardized. And then where you have people who are not given standard level of education, the effect is that such people cannot be able to access their information needs that will help them to also navigate themselves towards sustainable development. And these are all things that are responsible for rural poverty around the rural areas. Another issue in line with that is also the issue of family sizes. When you look at the family size around the rural areas, you see an individual with 20-something children, 30-something children, and then what are these children doing? Limited attention into farming, and then the rest don't have what is produced in that kind of a family, in such a family, cannot even go around. It's not adequate for maintenance of normal feeding rates. So the struggle is all about this vicious cycle of poverty. And these are all issues that are leading to poverty around the rural areas.
Okay, Prof. We keep saying poverty alleviation programs. You know, to what extent does the government poverty alleviation programs really aid in eradicating poverty? Do they really have so much impact in the rural areas?
Yes, they have impact in rural areas, but the challenge again is the issue of inequality around these rural areas. When we talk about inequality, we are talking about unfavorable distribution of these resources. You discover that even among the rural communities, who is involved as beneficiaries of this government's intervention. Sometimes they are only people who are related to some of these government officials. And then if distribution turns out to be about who you know at a public level, then you will discover that these are some of the things that are also hampering the progress that should have been recorded as a result of these poverty related interventions or poverty alleviation activities. But we cannot rule out the fact that despite the fact that such things exist, there is still some measure of impact that is reaching out to these rural communities. What is happening in certain subnational levels may not be the same with some other subnational levels, but the design is good, but it's the implementation that is usually the problem. And if in terms of implementation, there is effective monitoring, where the rightful people that are expected to benefit from it are the ones that are benefiting, then you can be certain that there is likely going to be serious improvement in terms of poverty alleviation across the rural areas.
There have been quite a number of poverty alleviation measures from past governments. I don't know if it's up to you to actually assess some of these measures, which was successful, which was not. I remember the days of SAP, the Day-Free, Operation Feed the Nation, quite a number of them. Which one would you consider most successful?
Yes, in terms of all of them by design, they were targeted to achieve success. They were targeted to improve the living condition of the ruralites. But unfortunately, at the implementation stage, That is where we normally have challenges. So what I will rather say is that there is a need for effective monitoring, because monitoring is key in every project. And once monitoring is affected, then the impact that is expected to be gained as a result of those programs will tend not to be achieved. Think of, let me give you a simple example, the Anko Boras program. It was a program with a very good and robust target. But because of bastardization due to ineffective monitoring, the government that came in had to scrap it off. And I would have advised, rather than scraping it off, is to look at the teething problems. What are the issues that came up that led to the inefficiencies recorded or highlighted in the course of the programs, and then see what needs to be improved so that we can have them sustained. The major issue is inconsistency of these programs. You start a program, after 2-3 years, another government comes in and it scripts it up, and there will be no consistency. And once, sometimes impact-related assessments are not things you will do within 1-2-3 years. Before such impacts are felt, such programs are scraped off, and then new ones are designed. Another government comes in and also scrapes off the old ones and comes up with new ones. So much of it is having to do with policy somersaults, inconsistency of these policies, and that is one of the major issues that is affecting the achievement of whatever goal is expected to have been achieved as a result of such programs.
Hey, Prof, let's look at migration. The issue, what exactly would you say is the impact of rural-urban migration on both the rural economy and the national development as a whole?
Yes, majorly, when you look at the rural communities, certain investments that are expected to be made available in such areas are not there. And the youths particularly are driven by the norm today, where people want comfort. I can remember in those days when around southwestern Nigeria, where we have these farm settlement centers. These farm settlement centers were provided with electricity, we are provided with certain basic amenities that will make people to stay around and produce different varieties of crops. But today, if you look at the entire rural areas, some of these things, there are no the accessible roads are inadequate. And then some of these infrastructures, such as electricity, pipe-borne water, are not available. And then when an individual moves from the village, even health facilities are not adequate. So when you have a crop of people that have been privileged to come to city and see what is obtainable in the cities, you will see they are more comfortable to live within the cities than to live within the agrarian area where they can be engaged in farming. So one of the things I should be advocating for is concerted effort at investments on these infrastructural facilities at rural areas, so that life can be more meaningful, life can be more encompassive, and then people will be willing to live around this environment and enjoy the luxury of life, and at the same time key into production of crops. You can imagine somebody who was living in the village or living in a rural area and had left farming only to be in the city and be cutting nails. It's not as if the cutting of nails will have given him more income than keen into farming while living in the village, but the comfort associated with being in the city is now pulling out vibrant youths that are productive, that should ordinarily be productive, are now moving out of it. And that is also affecting the productivity of our food and then leading to poverty around the rural areas.
All right, going back to the root causes of poverty in rural areas, while you were mentioning access to healthcare, something came to mind, and that's access to education also. Perhaps that could also be the reason that there is rising rate of poverty among rural dwellers in Nigeria, the level of access to education.
Yes, access to education is beyond just construction of mere blocks of classrooms at village level or at rural areas in the name of their schools. We need to look at it in the context of who are the category of teachers around these rural areas. What is the capacity of these teachers? What are they able to impact on ruralites, our children of the ruralites, such that is the teaching given an impact that such people can be able to access information about their needs? Because if the kind of education that is provided at village or rural area is not in tandem with the kind of education that is provided in cities, then you can then understand why some of them are not even participating in school, because the school system is not providing them with the necessary skill, with the necessary advantage, with the necessary independence that education should have been able to. Now, today's nature of agricultural activities are related to improve farming systems, improve agricultural practices. Now, all these things can only be made meaningful to people in the rural areas where their capacities are improved. But the question is, beside having just block of classrooms, what are the nature of teachers who are around there? What nature of education are they providing the ruralites or the children in these local communities? And then what this knowledge, is it transcending to productivity or not? Is it improving their livelihood or not? If there is no difference between somebody who had gone to such schools at rural areas and then somebody who hasn't gone to school, you can then understand why some people are even saying Boko is haram. But we need to be thinking of making the genuine diversification and investments in rural areas, so that in terms of education, so that people within these areas can have improved version of an educational system that can truly impact on their capacity, so that if there is anything called improved agricultural practices, it is something they can practice, it is something that they can venture in, and they can see the difference between those who are educated and those who are not educated, even within the same community.
Okay, Prof, what specific policies should the Nigerian government put in place in order to eradicate poverty to an extent and make sure that it is sustainable as well?
First among the issues is the issue of insecurity, which has displaced so many farmers, displaced so many people within the rural areas. So government must just make a concerted effort in stemming the tide of banditry, in social disorder that is going on around the rural areas. That should be the first thing. It may not be a policy, but it must be committed. It must be seen to be committed through all means to ensure that there is safety, because most of these farms are within the fringes of these rural areas. So once people are not secured around such areas, then you can imagine what quality or quantity of food that will be produced from our farming communities. Then secondly, there should also be a concerted effort in ensuring that whatever schools that are built within the rural areas, we should be able to post in quality teachers. Then posting quality teachers, and for them to stay around such areas, then there is also a need for what? There is a need for investment in terms of these basic amenities that will sustain people to live around such areas without necessarily having to be thinking of, let me run back to the cities. Think of it, for example, even among coppers, those who are posted to villages, before you know it, they are looking for redeployment to cities. Why are they doing that? Because the environment within the rural communities is not conducive for them. And these are some of the things that we also expect that the government should now key into ensuring that whatever investments that we needed to do, we should factor in making investments around these rural areas. And that should be some of the policies that we suggest that we need to. Then another issue is the issue of providing what we call agricultural processing hubs around these areas. Now, if we provide such things, automatically it has a way of enhancing the quality of life within these rural areas. Think of, say, an environment that is producing, say, rice, and you have a rice mill situated around there. That rice mill has the capacity to employ certain individuals within the communities. And then we also have the capacity to improve on the productivity of farmers around the area, because once there is a market around the communities, what that means is that the community will also be engaged in expanding their farmlands. So this kind of policies have a direct effect in improving the livelihood and then the income of the farmer, which will lead to an improvement in terms of way of living.
Prof, considering that a significant portion of rural dwellers rely on agriculture, how much do some factors like climate change, land degradation, lack of infrastructure exacerbate poverty among rural dwellers?
Yes, first and foremost, let me just concentrate on the issue of climate change. Climate change has come to stay, and most people around the rural areas cannot understand the concepts very well. So there is a need for awareness campaigns so that people will be able to know that now that climate change has come to stay, there is a need for an improved version of agricultural practices. It could be calling for improved use of improved variety, high yielding varieties, or varieties that will thrive within a short period of time, so that we don't remain on the rudimentary system of production that we are so used to. There is a need to also adopt these new mechanisms of using varieties that have been certified to be more resistant to certain norms, certain pests and diseases, such that local communities will be informed, they will be given such an awareness. And then there is also a need for information flow, so that they can understand information from NIMET, information from some of these organizations that are responsible for giving information that has to do with weather and climate. Then by that, people can know when is the best time to plant and what varieties should people plant, particularly for a given season, so that you don't end up planting those old versions of varieties that rain may not be adequate to sustain, and at the end, drought may come in and leading to poor yields, stuff like that. And then there is also the need for government to key into the issue of the marketing system. Once the roads are not accessible to rural communities, what that means is that the rural community farmers cannot access markets for their products. And because agriculture is the products are susceptible to so many changes over a period of time, if you don't sell a certain season, especially when there is glut and there is no access to a bigger market, then some of these things can lead to a farmer having to sell his product at a very ridiculous price, and that will have a direct negative impact on his income. And that will also make such people not to be committed again into farming. And once we have those kind of challenges, now think of it, today the price of agricultural commodities has come down. What is actually responsible for that? We are aware that government has opened up so many of their strategic reserves in providing or in bringing out some of these products, and have ended up crashing the price. But if you sustain this policy over a long period of time, it's going to affect our farmers. It's also going to lead to unemployment, because there will be displacement of people within the farming community. So we need to balance up these things in terms of policy decisions, so that these prices should not be, we shouldn't open our borders in such a way that we will bring in goods from foreign nations that will be cheap and will compete with our own, and at the end, our own is sold at a ridiculous price or at a cheaper rate, and at the end, farmers are not getting adequate turnover for their product.
Conclusion, what innovative community-driven solutions do you think can effectively address rural poverty, such that can be replicated elsewhere?
Yes, part of it is if government can adequately support the establishment of cooperatives, then these cooperatives have a way of improving the productivity of these farmers. You understand that an average farmer at the rural level is operating at subsistence level, producing only what he can consume at the immediate family, not having enough that he will even dispose. Today, if you go to the market, people you see going to look for what to eat are mostly the same people who are living in rural areas who are tagged as farmers. So government needs to see how it can set them into cooperatives and then see how it can use the cooperatives as a means of providing incentives to these members of these cooperatives so that they can be able to gain in the advantage of having to go into production at large scale. This is one way they can be able to. Some of them don't have collateral that they can even access formal funding in terms of credits from our formal institutions. So you need to see how you can organize these farmers into cooperatives so that they can be able to access credits at government, at former banking institutions, and then at the end, they can be able to get enough capital that will sustain their ability to produce at large quantity.
Thank you very much, Professor GONA AYUBA, for your robust contribution on the subject matter this evening.
Save Nature TV. News in your pocket.